Dr. Tami Prince, and you are watching Health Tips with the Nation's Bedside Doctor on Clark TV Network, where we believe in the future. On this show, we have real talk on real issues that affects our communities every single day. It is Thursday. Happy Thursday. I am so glad to be here with you. I hope that you're finishing out your week strong. This was a great week for me, and I'm looking forward to the weekend for sure. We've had some gorgeous weather here in Atlanta. Hopefully your weather is getting better now that we're, into springtime. Of course, we're all dealing with pollen, and oh my God, I had to get my car washed yesterday, and 5 minutes after I got the car washed, what was back on my car? Pollen. So I'm sure that you all can relate to that. But hopefully you all are well. Tonight's topic is going to be very powerful, but a much needed discussion, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope you stick and stay with us. So before we get into tonight's topic, I always like to make sure that you are in the know. So here is your 5-minute consult. Do you use probiotics? A lot of people actually do, and there have been many studies to show whether or not probiotics is beneficial versus not beneficial, and who should be using it, and how much is too much of probiotics. So I want to actually highlight there have been a couple of recent studies that have been done on this very issue. One is based out of Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri. And so just to give you a background, because most people hear probiotics, they see it in yogurts and you name it, probiotics is in it. But what exactly are probiotics? Well, in order to know what probiotics is, you need to actually know what prebiotics is. You probably haven't heard that before, but prebiotics are plant-based foods, and what they do is they provide the fibers and all of the nutrients that we need to have good bacteria in our body. And so they basically will tip the balance to make sure that we have more beneficial bacteria versus potentially harmful ones that can enter our body at any given time. So probiotics, on the other hand, they consist of live bacteria and other organisms that are meant to colonize the gut and basically knock out the bad bacteria. So they set up shop and help the body along. Now, the way that they work, like I said, is because they set up shop. So if you do have some bad bacteria that's in there, hopefully they will be able to knock it out and run them out and get your body back to your normal gut flora. Now, we do know that probiotics in other studies have also been shown to stimulate the host immune response, and it allows for patients to recover from infections. We also know that it actually helps with diarrhea, but it's the kind of diarrhea that happens when you have an infection. So we know that it can actually prevent you from having the diarrhea if you take it early enough in your illness. What we also know is that it doesn't necessarily help traveler's diarrhea. So sometimes traveler's diarrhea is, caused by something other than an infection. So studies have not been shown to prove that beneficial for the traveler's diarrhea, but definitely the diarrhea that is caused by infection, it has been shown to work. Also, in people that have an illness called irritable bowel syndrome. So in irritable bowel, you have alternating bouts of diarrhea and constipation. And it definitely helps with those individuals that suffer from that. So, like I said, if you take it early, before, during, and then after your illness, as well as when you're on antibiotics, because antibiotics can also change your gut flora and can cause diarrhea. So if you take it before, during, and after antibiotic treatment, you can also have some benefit from the probiotics. Now, sometimes too much of a good thing is actually not good for your body. And we know that if you take too much, or if you're not taking it correctly or for incorrect reasons, they can actually be potentially harmful, and people don't know that. So People that are what we call immunocompromised, meaning that your immune system, for whatever reason, does not work the way that a normal immune system. Sick babies and infants, and also people recovering from surgery can actually have harmful effects if they are using probiotics. So those people have to be very, very careful. So, from the research that was done from Washington University, like I said, in St. Louis, Missouri, they also found that probiotics can evolve in the host gut after administration and thus causing it to be less effective and, like I said, potentially harmful. Remember what I told you, probiotics kind of sets up shop in your body, and in doing that they can adapt to a number of different changes in your body. If there's too much sugar that's available, guess what, probiotics can use that, and then they can stay in the gut longer than what they're supposed to, and they can grow unchecked. If they grow unchecked, then they may knock out your good bacteria as well. So that's where the harm can come into play. So you have to be very, very careful when you are doing any kind of treatment or eating or using any kind of supplements that involves probiotics. I always tell patients, make sure that you involve your physician early on. Make sure that you and your physician have sat down and discussed whether or not you're a candidate for probiotics. Just because it's out there on the market doesn't mean that that's necessarily good for you. And so every individual is different, and you need to be keeping your physician in the loop about what you're putting into your body so they can best guide you on whether or not that's going to be helpful to you. So, just caution. That's all I can tell you is caution. And that's what I preach. I preach making sure that you're your own best advocate, and at the end of the day, only you know what you're doing to your body. As physicians, we have to rely on you to be able to tell us what you're doing. So don't be afraid to tell your physician things, okay? So that is my 5-minute consult. Now we are going to get actually into tonight's discussion. That, like I said, is very, very powerful and a much needed discussion. I've got two guests with me. One is in studio and one is by video. So in studio, my guest is Miss Jennifer Bivens, and Jennifer actually is with the organization. She's president and CEO of the Georgia Network to End Assault, Sexual Assault here in Georgia, like I said. And on video is Laura Palumba, who is with the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. So thank you both ladies for being with us tonight. I truly appreciate everything that you all have done to make yourselves available. I know it's a pretty busy time because what month is this? Sexual Assault Awareness. So, just because we're doing topics during the Awareness Month does not mean that it should not make you more aware at other times of the year. You need to be fully aware, but we're going to give you the gist of it, and we hope that after Laura and Jennifer tell you about some of the things that their organizations are doing, that you will join them in this fight. So let's talk about sexual assault. Laura, can you tell me what sexual assault is?
So when we're talking about sexual assault, that term is encompassing of all unwanted sexual contact, whether it be verbal harassment or physical harassment, and it includes everything such as sexual assault and rape as well.
So, rape is what, Jennifer?
Okay, so typically rape we see within statutes, within states, and that's really a legal term that states use when they're coming up with legislation and laws. They will say that somebody has committed the act of rape. But as Laura said, rape is part of a bigger term, which is the sexual assault piece or sexual violence.
Yeah.
So rape is more specific,
Right.
and so you'll see terms interchangeably, but typically, I know we like to use either sexual assault or sexual violence because it's more encompassing.
Encompassing.
Of any and all acts that potentially are criminalized.
Absolutely. Sexual violence and assault doesn't necessarily have to be penetration. And that's what rape actually is the penetration portion to that. But it can be, forcing a victim to, do something with a perpetrator that they don't know or they couldn't actually know that person. Why is it important for us as a community, Laura, to be aware of sexual assault, and how can we as a community help with that?
So sexual violence happens in every community, and it's something that we know is very widespread and prevalent. And what that looks like in terms of statistics is that 1 in 5 women and 1 in 67 men will experience sexual violence, assault, or attempted rape at some point in their lives. And when we think about those statistics, what that means for us is that most of us know a survivor, whether or not you know a survivor. And this includes not just adults, but children, teens, adults, and older adults. And so it's something that's impacting every community, and it's not just the survivors in that community, it's their loved ones. And honestly, if any of us is unsafe, all of us are less safe, right? So when we think about our role as a community, is we need to be creating a community that's as safe as possible for everyone in that community, so that we can really turn the tide against assaults and abuse.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I wanted to mention, you were saying that whether it's somebody they know or a stranger, so we have stats that say that 85% of the assaults occur, it's by someone the victim knows. So it's not the stranger jumping out of the bushes, just grabbing somebody and assaulting them.
It's somebody that's in your house or near you.
Exactly, in your house, in your church, that goes to school with you, that goes to work with you, or as a work colleague. So I think that the myth that it's just the stranger and we don't, it's not the people that we know, that's not accurate.
Absolutely.
It is mostly the people that we know.
And that's what makes it even trickier, because you want to be able to trust, but sometimes it's those that are closest to us that can hurt us the most.
Right.
Let's talk about consent, because that's really the hallmark, too, of sexual assault. Consent, Laura, is what? So consent is basic as permission for something to happen. During Sexual Assault Awareness Month, one of the messages we're really trying to spread is that consent is a healthy, normal part of everyday interactions. It's not just something that we can practice in our relationships or when we're going to be having sex, but it's something that is an everyday way of us checking in with other people, respecting their boundaries. And that's why this year's campaign theme is I Ask, which is just a simple way that we can communicate about consent, is asking before you hug someone, before you go to kiss someone, asking whether or not your partner is in the mood or interested in certain activities, and that by taking that step of asking, by really changing the way we think about our sexual interactions and really opening up communication, it makes it such a healthier, safer experience for all parties.
Absolutely.
And even with children, I mean, we probably can think back to family gatherings when somebody says to a child, "Come here and give me a hug." We need to be asking whether it's little people or big people. We need to be asking, if it's okay, if can I have a hug?
And sometimes children will be like, "Yeah, no, I don't really want to do
And
that."
that's okay.
They're actually better than adults at it, I think.
But there are parents that get maybe angry at them. They don't need to. They need to support their child. It's okay if that child doesn't want to hug somebody. It's okay if an adult doesn't want to hug somebody or have physical contact with somebody. And so I believe that the I Ask campaign is a great way to really look at just in general with all of our interactions.
And I think you touched on it too. People get upset when you ask a question and you say no. I don't want to be touched in that way, or I don't want to be hugged in that way, and I don't want to kiss you, and things like that. But it's that person's right to be able to say yes or no, and you have to respect that. You have to respect that.
Yeah, we try to encourage people not to take no personally. So if you think about it with children in your life, it just may be today. You might say, well, how about a high five? And they might be okay with that, or they might say no to that too. But just as important as the step of asking when it comes to consent is the skill to accept a no. So to know that that's that by doing that, you're respecting that other person's their rights and their boundaries, and that it's not something that we should consider as a sacrifice or a judgment against us. It's just our opportunity to be showing another person respect.
Absolutely. So along the lines of consent, there is an inability to refuse. Jennifer, what's that mean? Inability to refuse.
So if you have got so if you're at a party, which this happens a lot. We have parties that go on, teenage parties, college parties. The kids are drinking, maybe doing recreational drugs, and so if you are too incapacitated, to say no, you're also too incapacitated to say yes. So anybody that that was there with you, or had an idea of doing something with you, needs to basically stop, because if you are not able to knowingly consent to any type of activity, then that other person needs to back away and basically respect the fact that you don't know what you're doing or saying at this point, and then they as that person's friend or boyfriend or girlfriend need to respect that, and basically maybe take you home, or but again, not take advantage, or try to go ahead and have sex with you again, because if that person is not willing to consent, you've just committed sexual assault against that person.
And I think historically, it's been, well, she hasn't said yes or no, so they take it as it's okay. Or the woman will even say, well, I didn't actually say it, so it must be okay. Laura, how do we change that mindset?
Yeah, so the absence of a no is not a yes, and it's not sufficient just to not hear something from your partner. So we're really trying to change that mentality that this is not a one-time decision, but you're actively checking in with the person, and there's no coercion or manipulation involved. You aren't putting any pressure on that person to give you the answer that you want to hear, because if there is that pressure, or if there are assumptions on your part, then it's not true consent. And so the most basic way we explain it to people is, if you're not sure, ask again, right? If it's not completely clear, try asking again. And if you think about how, really think about how that person feels, and look for cues in their response, in terms of their body language, and whether or not they seem uneasy or nervous. And by picking up on all of that, we're all being, more respectful and healthy in our relationships.
That's where it comes into play, being respectful of each other's space and each other's bodies. My body is my body. It's not anybody else's, and my decision is my decision and not anybody else's. So we have to change that mindset of just being respectful of each other's space. I think that is crucial. Let's talk about some statistics, because Laura, you mentioned some of them. 1 in 3 women, I think it is, and about 1 in 4 women will experience sexual violence at any given point in their lifetime. Is that correct?
So there's a lot of different studies that have looked at this issue nationally, and what we see is that sometimes the rates vary. Some studies may say 1 in 4, specific to maybe a college campus, and some, looking at a general population, might say 1 in 5. But either way, what we're seeing is a very high rate of prevalence. And across studies, what we commonly see is not only that sexual violence is something that is a common experience for women and also impacts many men, but that it often happens earlier on in life. So a lot of people are having these experiences even before the age of 18. And so I think what that reminds us is it's so important when we're having these conversations to be thinking about young people and children.
Yeah, we got to start it early. I know when I was coming up, I'm not going to tell we used to have sex ed
Right.
classes and things like that. And, in the sex ed classes, that's one of the things we would talk about. So I don't know if that's going on in the schools. Are you all, either Laura or Jennifer can answer this, going into the schools and being able to get into some of the sex ed classes, if there's any, that are in these schools now?
So some of our local programs here in Georgia, and again, it could be similar to other states as well, may have relationships with local schools and may be allowed to come in and do presentations with their students. So maybe not the exact same presentations that you and I and Laura maybe
Yeah.
maybe experienced, but I will say that there really has been a turn in the tide on really focusing in on, instead of just expressing and explaining the awareness piece of sexual violence and what that looks like. There really is a focus in on prevention and what that looks like, and so we're really engaging in with young people. Again, just like what we've been talking about, healthy relationships, where we're talking about, asking for consent, and those type of programs that are happening at the local level, both in high school and frankly in college. But these are evidence-based programs that are being utilized, and so the hope is that that's going to really kind of change the tide of what we've been seeing with sexual assault rates.
Jennifer, excuse me, not Jennifer, Laura, would you agree with that?
Yes, so this is something that absolutely is beneficial to be bringing into the school setting, that just like teens need information to prepare them for the workforce and for for their future careers. They also need to be equipped with this information too, understanding healthy relationships, understanding how the significance of the issue of sexual assault, as well as having tools to such as consent and respect. And the other piece of it is that we also think that it's education that doesn't need to just happen in our schools, and so it's something that we want parents to feel more comfortable and equipped to talk about, so that when it comes to every stage of your child's development, whether or not they are little and you're letting them know that it's okay to say no to a hug, or if they're a teen and you're having an open conversation with them, probably a conversation your parents never had with you about consent and relationships and respect, it's so important.
And I would also say, like I said, and Laura and our groups have talked about this a lot. The bystander intervention piece. See, and that's a newer piece too.
Oh, let's talk about
so
that.
If you see something happening, we want to encourage people. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to go up in the middle of two people that are having an issue. But if you can do something safely, then the idea is, as a community member, we should be responsible for doing something.
We should not be bystanders.
Don't just stand there and do nothing, right? I mean, engage. Whether it's call the police, whether it's go get somebody else to help you engage, whether it's maybe turning the conversation elsewhere, or maybe taking a person and saying, hey, let's go do this. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting in the middle of any type of dangerous situation. It could be as simple as is kind of making a shift to where then there's an incident that didn't occur because you were willing to step up and say something or intervene.
Absolutely. In this day and age where people are using, the cameras to record things, do you think that is a good or a bad thing with this bystander? Because I think when people are using their video, they're thinking that they're helping, but are they truly helping where they're not really getting into the mix, so to speak, but trying to highlight that, and I guess make the video go viral so that more people are aware of that.
So, and Laura, I was going to say, so from my perspective, if you're seeing someone being harmed, whether it's physically, whether it's verbally, whether and you're standing there videoing that, and you're not engaging, then I think that creates a problem as well.
I think there's more harm than good.
Again, I want to make sure that we're teaching people that do something proactive to try to prevent whatever harm you think is occurring or whatever you think is about to occur. If you can step in or do something to try to change that kind of trajectory, then that's what we're trying to get at. Stand aside and videotaping somebody being harmed is not our idea of a healthy intervention. Bystander intervention.
Absolutely.
It's actually, possibly, creating further issues.
I agree with that.
Saying of people, not being willing to do something. So if, like I said, so if you see something going on, do something. As an active bystander, be active. Don't be passive with your camera, because you know what, you're then part of the problem.
I agree. How about you, Laura? How you feel about cameras and people taping and they're still bystanders, I think, to a certain extent when they're doing that.
Yes, so the main thing that we are encouraging for people is to intervene in some way that helps the person who's being the target of the behavior. So there's a way with a video you could do that. If you're saying to the person, what you're doing is not okay, and if you continue, I'm going to tape this, it might create a sense of accountability for them that makes them stop their behavior. But what unfortunately we see more of is people who don't necessarily know what to do, and so they're just taping, or people who are taping because we've kind of evolved into this culture of thinking that, thinking of real life, everything going around us on real life is content for YouTube. And what's unfortunate about that is there's actually many cases in which young people specifically, or people at a party can actually, with a video, be taping something like a sexual assault, and instead of getting involved, are just there recording it. And that's so problematic, because we really, we want people that your role is, your role is to be, standing up against inappropriate behavior. And if you don't feel comfortable or safe doing that, taking a step such as calling the police, or finding maybe finding some other people nearby who, as a group, you can get involved and respond to. So we do want people to find meaningful ways to get involved, versus just you're further normalizing it if you're just sort of thinking, I'm going to stand by and videotape this. And we want to send a message, actually, that's not okay. We're not going to tolerate that, and you should stop what you're doing.
Absolutely. And I always say too, if you're witnessing, you're already involved. A lot of people would say, "Oh, I don't want to get involved. It's not my issue." Yeah, it actually is. By the mere fact that you witnessed this and you did not speak up about it,
and you're a community member, and they're a community member, and as part of our community, we have a responsibility to do something and to say something and to hold each other accountable.
Yeah, and I like Laura's idea of saying, you turning it around in the video. Hey, I'm taping you right now. You need to stop.
Right.
That way, you stop things right, then and there. And so I like that idea. That I think is very helpful for people that are using video, because, like I said, video is not going anywhere. So we have to use that to our advantage. And if things are done properly, the police actually can use that video footage to be able to further assist the case. So, Laura, who's at risk for sexual assault?
So when we're talking about sexual assault, this is something that impacts people of all communities, identities, and backgrounds. So it is something that really no community or group is immune from. And so in terms of, when we think about risk, what can be challenging is that for most people who experience sexual assault or harassment or abuse, there's not really something they could have done to change the circumstances that led to that assault. And so what's more important for us to understand is how sexual violence has a broad broad impact on all communities, and then also disproportionately impacts others. So understanding that people with disabilities, children, college students, and other groups are experiencing sexual assault at higher rates, but it's not something that individuals in those groups are doing. It's there's a number of conditions that contribute to those factors.
So, who or what does a perpetrator look like, Jennifer?
So a perpetrator can be, well, let me say this first. The majority of perpetrators are male. However, the majority of males are not perpetrators. So I want to make sure that we make that clear.
Yes, not all males will commit any kind of sexual assault or violence.
Right. So there also are female perpetrators as well. But we do know, again, based on the research that we have, that the majority of the perpetrators that that have been identified, are male. But also, too, we really look at, when we're looking at risk and protective factors regarding perpetrators, we also know that children that grow up in homes where there was a very strong distinction between the male's role and the female's role in the home, and maybe the male was identified, as kind of the head and in charge and kind of the more superior person. Those type of messages to young males really lends itself to those individuals that are raised up believing that they are superior or more important, or that males have a power and are in charge, and basically can if they want sex, they can have sex, and it's not, again, we talked about consent earlier. They don't have to get consent according to their belief system and their values. Young boys are unfortunately taught to be tough, be strong, be in charge, be a go-getter, how many sex partners have you had? Again, and it's more about
that kind of macho.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying, and that we've really done a disservice to young males, and really not allowing them to be emotional, to show emotion, because we all should be able to show emotion, and it's actually a healthy thing. But males that have the belief from their home environment that's not okay, and they shouldn't show emotion, again, tend to be those individuals who grow up and they have a kind of a hyper masculine ideal that they need to be portrayed as. And so a lot of times, unfortunately, those are the individuals that we see are the potential perpetrators, are those individuals that they don't see equality as something to achieve, or they don't see something like asking for consent to do something. They basically do what they want to do, and unfortunately, if you were the person that's with them and they wanted to have sex, then they believe they can have sex, and that was their right, and they can do that. And so it really starts, again, we talked about with young males, it really does start with really changing what we value in our society and what we're telling young males they should strive to be versus females. It should really be a more equitable system, in that we're supporting both males and females to be strong individuals and to be caring and to care about each other and to care about your community, versus this idea that I need to strive to be above someone else, or males are more important than females, or that type of thing.
Everybody should be equal.
Exactly, and so that really, again, when you're looking at protective and risk factors for perpetration as well as victimization, it really drives home the messages that we hope that today, that we through our programming are getting out about what we expect from males and females.
Absolutely. So. Jennifer, I don't know why, Laura, I always want to call you Jennifer, and Jennifer always Laura.
That's okay.
Laura, did you want to add anything to what Jennifer was saying?
So Jennifer made some great points, and I think the other thing that I would mention is, again, victims often know the person who sexually assaulted them, and so this idea of what we've been taught to think that perpetrators look like, whether it's through what you've seen on the news or read in the newspaper of strangers or monsters or predators, oftentimes it's actually someone that the person knows and trusts. It might be a family member, a friend, a loved one, a romantic partner, or someone who's very trusted in the community, everyone's favorite teacher or coach. And so we really do kind of need to remind ourselves that there's no way just by looking at someone knowing whether or not they're capable of causing that type of harm. And so everybody needs to be sort of accountable to the same rules, right? So no one's character or whether or not they have done great things in the community has will excuse the fact that if they do something inappropriate, they need to be held accountable for it.
Absolutely. There are some other risk factors I think that have been found too. Of course, drug and alcohol use, growing up in a household where violence of any kind, but specifically the sexual violence, lends to having more of an issue later down the road for the person, be it male or female. Lack of employment opportunities, anything that will, cause them to have financial strain can also increase the chances for that kind of behavior. That doesn't necessarily mean that just because you have those characteristics mean that you're going to go on to offend. That just means that you're possibly at a higher risk and that you need to just, stay on your P's and Q's and stay aware so that you don't fall into that trap.
And I want to add in too that I oftentimes hear, and I kind of cringe when I hear this, but especially for people that are they mean well and they're trying to do what they believe is the right thing, and so they'll set up self-defense classes for women, or they'll set up on campuses they'll want to do the blue lights or the phones, and I'm not saying that any of that is wrong, but what I get concerned about and what I think my colleagues get concerned about is when there's the idea that, well, if you had only taken a self-defense class, then you wouldn't have been assaulted, or the likelihood of you being assaulted would be less, and that's not true
I've
at all,
heard that
because
before.
because Laura just brought up, the person that's assaulting you is not a stranger. Maybe you would use tactics in self-defense. I don't know, or maybe you're too scared to, or maybe so we're putting the onus on the victim, and that's not correct at all. So the victim needs to watch out how much she's drinking, or watch out what she's wearing, or go to a self-defense class. Like the victim's not doing these crimes; it's the perpetrators. So focusing in on the perpetrators and what we need to be messages we need to be passing along to our male colleagues, about perpetration and what that looks like. That's where we need to be, because somebody can't promise me if I go to a self-defense class that I'm going to be able to prevent an assault, because if it's somebody that I know, I promise you that I'm not going to be
Your
trying
guard
to do
may be
something.
down.
Yeah, my guard
enough.
is down. So and again, and that really puts again the responsibility on the victim, which is not okay to do. We need to again focus in on the services that we're providing victims, and then really focusing in on what we need to do to change the values in our society, to change the behaviors in our society, so that we don't have perpetrators, and so we don't have to worry about these crazy concoctions that people are coming up with that you wear as underwear to prevent sexual. That's insane. That is insane. So thanks for trying to help, but it's not being helpful, because assaults are still going to be occurring, right?
Yeah.
So we need to try to prevent those assaults, and again, really kind of addressing behaviors and attitudes and beliefs that perpetuate this is where we need to be.
Yeah, I think you and Laura are hitting the nail on the head, because so many victims, and I think this is probably why sexual assault and rape are the most unreported cases to police, by the mere fact that victims are embarrassed. They think that there was something that they should have been able to do to prevent this. It's been beaten to our heads that um, women have to act a certain way, and if we don't act that certain way, then we run the risk of being assaulted.
Right.
And you're absolutely correct. It is not the victim's
No,
fault
not at all.
ever.
Nope.
It is
Not at all.
always the perpetrator's fault.
Right.
And that's where we have to, and I applaud you and Laura's organizations for being able to get out here in the community to be able to change that mindset. Absolutely. Now, Laura, I did mention why women or men may not want to report their cases. Are and like I said, the biggest reason is because they know the person and they don't want to harm the family unit or the friendship unit by doing that. Are there some other reasons why people may not report?
Yes, so as you mentioned, sexual violence, sexual assault is the most unreported crime. And one of the reasons why is that people often face this fear of not being believed. And so that fear is something that's very, very silencing for victims. So that's why we really want to reiterate this message that victims are never to blame. And so whether or not someone's coming forward to you as a friend or coming forward to a police officer, just by taking that step of being supportive and listening to them and not questioning their story, we're really we're doing something very important in terms of supporting that person. Some of the other reasons can include fear of retaliation. So you may be also facing some pressure from others or threats from others to not report. You may be ashamed. You may fear being blamed for your experience. And then for some victims and survivors, the police aren't, they may not feel the safest when it comes to police. And so that distrust of law enforcement can also be a reason why survivors don't come forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. What are the consequences of sexual assault and not reporting, Jennifer?
So, there's definitely individual consequences, both for the individual victim, for that individual victim's family and loved ones. Again, I mean, they may experience. Well, first of all, every victim is different in the way that they, handle their assault, and so people that say, well, she came into the ER, but she wasn't crying, or she didn't look like that she was a victim. Well, maybe she's in shock, maybe maybe she's trying to like hide it. So different ways, and we really try to educate professionals about, don't expect to just see somebody balled up in the corner crying, because that might not be what you get, and they still are victims. But we also know that victims, a large number of victims, because 81% of victims experience PTSD, so post-traumatic stress disorder, and then also too, they may experience anxiety. They may, you mentioned earlier, they can't keep themselves focused on going to work and getting anything done. So it may be that they're falling apart on the inside, and then they're trying to kind of on the outside look like they are all together, but actually that's not happening. And so again, on an individual level, there's a lot of things that are occurring from the trauma that occurred, to the individual. And a lot of times these victims may not seek assistance until years later. And so after maybe, family, maybe the family's fallen apart, because, the family members maybe didn't know that, what was going on with them. From a society level, for all of us, we're talking about increased medical care that ends up coming up, because maybe that victim goes to their primary care physician because of gastrointestinal issues, and it's because of the assault, but maybe they don't tell their primary care physician. So again, there's a lot of increase in medical care that could be contributed to that sexual assault, as well as again there's lost time at work. There's if kids are involved, that they may not have their parent that was assaulted, may not be actively involved with them, because again, they're experiencing the aftermath of trauma. And so we really encourage victims to seek help, as soon as possible, and give them other options, as to what they can do. But as far as the effects, again, it's both individual along with their family and then the community. I mean, we've got, obviously we have perpetrators that are out there that, that are perpetrating against other people. And so again, so we really want to make sure that we're providing support to those victims that choose to come. For those victims that don't, that's okay too, and they need to, they need to seek help for themselves, and we need to support them. But the community, we really need to hold each other accountable for what's happening. And so when we see news media about people not being charged for different assaults, and or somebody bought their way out of this and that, I mean, we're only contributing to victims not wanting to come forward because they see what's happening, or they're being victim blamed, on TV or in their local community, that kind of thing. And so. So there's a large number of factors that play in to the outcomes of sexual assault in communities.
Absolutely.
So it's very unfortunate. We need to hopefully step in and do our part.
Yeah, when you were speaking about what the victims look like when they come in the ER as an OBGYN, there were times when I did have to do a SANE exam when I was at another location, and your SANE examiners are supposed to be certified, and so there's a particular way that we have to collect the evidence so that we can make sure that it can be tested properly and prepare for whatever legal issues and things are going to come down the pipeline after that. And so you have to be very careful when you're collecting this. But sometimes you maybe would see bruising, or any kind of genital or other bodily injuries, but that's not always the case, especially if it's somebody that they may not want to leave marks or be rough or anything like that, which you're expecting to see. And so you have to, as physicians and other mid-level providers who are seeing the victims in the ER, we have to keep in our minds, just because somebody doesn't have injuries that we think are supposed to be associated with a sexual assault, doesn't mean that it didn't happen. That's not for us to make that determination. That's for the legal system to make that determination. And so we have to do everything possible to be able to make the victims' first 24 to 48 hours more at ease.
And I will say there's research that talks about, depending on how they're treated within their first 24 hours, really lends itself to whether or not they want to go forward with a case. And I want to bring up one more thing. So within ERs or wherever there's exams being done, I would just really caution staff that are there. And I've been there, unfortunately, when it rotated all around the ER, that the person that was in room 7 was a sexual assault survivor, and that victim knew that and was mortified that everybody knew. And so so I would just say, and being respectful of, as professionals, and being respectful of that patient, while they're there, so that his assault is not being discussed. And she heard him right outside the room talking about her.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so, like I said, so those kind of things.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what she was feeling.
Yeah, so
because I know when we would have sexual assault victims, we always kept them in a completely separate area, away from all of the other patients, and so what was happening with them. And so it's very important as physicians and other mid-level providers, people can hear,
right.
And we have to be as sympathetic as possible, because you're right, in the first 24 to 48 hours, that is a critical time mentally for a lot of the victims. So you're absolutely right. I know, Laura, can you speak to some of the other issues that victims may have later down the road? I know I was seeing sometimes they also can get into drugs and alcohol and other risky behaviors, risky sexual behaviors. Can you get in on some of that?
Sure. So it's important to understand that sexual harassment, assault, and abuse really impact victims a variety of ways across their life. So there are some things that are immediate parts of their experience and recovery, and then some things that they may deal with for the long term or might be a chronic condition. And of course, there's not necessarily a cookie cutter response. So there's a range in things that people experience, but when it comes to emotional reactions, it's very common for victims to experience guilt, embarrassment, sadness, vulnerabilities, feelings of isolation. And when it comes to some of those psychological and other health impacts, it can be conditions like nightmares, depression, PTSD, as Jennifer mentioned, is very common, anxiety, low self-esteem, and then we also see higher rates of different conditions, whether it be eating disorders or other mental health conditions, substance abuse and use, and in studies that have looked at people who have experienced trauma at different points in their life also find that they have higher rates of other chronic health conditions, so things like diabetes, things like IBS. And so it's really more than what meets the eye in terms of what people expect to be the scars and wounds of harassment and abuse. Trauma is much more complex than that. It really impacts a person on multiple levels. And that's not to say that that's going to be every survivor's experience, and that's not to say that that's going to be a permanent experience for any survivor. You know, there's certainly things we can do to try and lessen these health impacts. But it is really important to understand that there's a significant impact on a number of levels to the short-term and long-term well-being of victims.
Hey, Laura, can you go through the steps that a sexual assault victim should take in the immediate phase of their assault all the way down to later years?
Mm-hmm. So this one's actually hard because it's not going to be the same for every survivor. It's not going to be the same for every victim. So I do think that if there is someone in your life that would be a safe and supportive person to talk to, that's really a helpful place for a lot of survivors to start. And if that's not someone who's in your immediate circle, we want victims and survivors to know that you can always reach out to your local rape crisis center, and the person on the other end of that line is going to be a safe and supportive person for you to talk to, and they can discuss with you some of your options. So what some of those options might look like could be making a report to police, but it could also just be expressing a need for emotional support and for someone to talk to. So there's really no single set of steps that's going to be the right fit for every survivor or victim. And I'm sure Jennifer probably has some great ideas to share as well.
And again, yeah, I would just say that if a victim, the federal legislation came down several years ago, and so now every victim that comes, that if they decide to want to have a sexual assault exam performed, again, this is something that's up to them. They don't have to have this done, but if they want to, they have the right to have that exam done, and they don't have to cooperate or speak with law enforcement. I mean, they can have an exam, and then they can, currently our law, Georgia's, and the laws are a little bit different for every state, but Laura, all the states are in compliance, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Sure, yeah. So all the states basically had to comply to receive Violence Against Women Act funding, saying that a victim has the right to an exam. And so again, today a victim has the right to an exam in every state. They don't have to speak with law enforcement or make a report to law enforcement. They can have an exam, and then they can decide, when they want to, if they want to go forward later, or maybe they don't want to go forward later again. But it's up to them, and it's something that we, as Laura mentioned, things are different for everybody, and we want to make sure that victims, have the right to decide what's right for them. And so if they want an exam, great, they can have an exam, and then they can go ahead and go forward if they want to make a report to law enforcement and, go forward with the criminal justice process, or they don't have to have an exam at all if they don't want to. We do recommend that they seek medical services just for their own health to make sure that they get any kind of STD testing or any kind of prophylaxis that they may need. But again, they may not want to go forward. But if they do want to go forward, they're able to do that. And if they just want an exam done, and then in Georgia, the current law is that they can wait. They have 12 months to decide if they want to go forward. So the kit, if they wanted a kit done, the kit will be held, and then they can decide, within that 12 months if they want to go forward or not with the criminal justice case. But, the criminal justice system, not everybody chooses to do that. And again, we're going to support the victim on whatever they want to do. They were the victim of this crime. They need to decide for themselves what's going to be their best, their best options, and to go forward. And so the victim advocates are going to be there to support them at these different centers.
Yeah, no decision is a bad decision.
No,
I
right.
would always tell patients, I would rather for you to have the exam first and then decide later, as opposed to having no exam at all and then deciding later down the road, wait, I do want this prosecuted, but now we don't have the evidence to be able to do that. So I would always encourage, and even if the patient did not want to speak to the police, because of course the police would be there at the time when I was getting ready to go in the room, I said, well, she may or may not want to talk to you. Let me, talk to her first and see how she feels. I did have a couple of patients that did not want to talk to police. I said, that's fine.
Right.
Just let me get the evidence,
Right,
just in case
right.
you do. And so I've never had a refusal from
Right.
a patient where they did not want the exam
Right.
to be done.
Right.
And, some of the patients are very apologetic about how they look during these exams. I don't care how you look. I just want you to come in.
Right.
They will, be embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed. This is the time when you need to tell me everything so that if you do decide to, go forth with your case, I can give the police all the information that you're going to need to be able to nail this perpetrator.
Right.
Hopefully. And so, just making them feel comfortable. I would always tell patients too, or just, women in general, try not to shower or use the bathroom before you come in to do the exam, and try to
Right.
come in either with the same clothes that you have on, or if you change out, put the other clothes in a sealed bag.
Right.
So that we can get the evidence
Sealed-
off of the
sealed
clothing.
paper bag.
Yes, sealed paper bag. Yes, not
I mean,
a
if they choose-
Ziploc. Please don't do a Ziploc.
And
yes.
again, yeah, if they choose to go that to go that route, and again, in some victim, I've been advocate for several years, and there were victims that definitely wanted to do all that, and then there's victims that
They don't want to do any of that.
exactly,
Yep.
exactly. And so, and I would also say, and Laura may have something to add to this, but I have had different professionals that have said to victims before, well, if you don't go forward with this, then this guy can just go do this to somebody else. And I want to be very clear with this. This victim didn't cause the assault. The perpetrator did.
Yeah.
So we cannot and should not put the blame of the of her or him or whoever
Or
the
the
victim
pressure,
is,
not
the
only-
pressure on them to go forward, because again, they did not cause the assault. They were the victim of the assault, and again, we have no right to put that expectation on that victim. That is something that is individual to that victim, and they need to decide what it is that they want to do. We have no right and shouldn't be saying anything about that they're going to be responsible if somebody else is assaulted because you didn't go forward and make a charge or file a report. So, and again, and this is not every professional, but I have heard some of them, and it does not help this individual in their healing process, and that really is the focus of what we need to be looking at with regards to victims.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, you mentioned part of CDC has a program called Stop SV, or Stop Sexual Violence, and this was implemented as a result. You mentioned about the legislature. So Congress did pass in 1994 a legislation, Violence Against Women Act. and it was reauthorized in 2013. So, just to give you a background, when Congress enacts laws, they do have to be reactivated after a certain time frame. And so luckily this law did just get reactivated. And with that, was established the Rape Prevention and Education Program at the CDC, or Center for Disease Control and Prevention. And the hallmark of that program is to develop and strengthen sexual violence prevention on the local, state, and national levels. So, Laura's on the national level, and Jennifer is here on the local and state level. And that program, so what STOP actually means is they're wanting to promote social norms that protect against sexual violence. The key is to prevent this from ever occurring in the first place. So we, need to promote the norms by bystander approaches, mobilizing men and boys as allies. The next step is to teach skills to prevent sexual violence. Be it social emotional learning, or promoting healthy sexual behaviors. That all falls into that teaching mode. Providing opportunities to empower and support girls and women. So strengthening the economic support for women, and strengthening the leadership opportunities. We also have create protective environments. So we want to, protect everybody,
And
men and women.
And if they want to go to the CDC website, there's actually a listing of different programs that people, if they're interested in, purchasing the program, or finding out more about the programs that they want to implement. Like I said, there's several programs on there. There's Safe Dates, there's Green Dot for colleges. There's there's different programs that all focus in on either some of these or one or two of these, or anyway. But they've all been vetted, and they're all evidence based. And so we really are, focusing on using these programs within communities. The CDC website regarding sexual violence, and there's going to be programs that are going to be listed that they cite.
Absolutely. And then the final thing is support victims and survivors to lessen their harms. So in our last couple of minutes, we didn't get a chance to delve into campus assault violence, but Title IX. Laura, can you briefly go over Title?
So Title IX is the piece of legislation that impacts college campuses, and what it is it's the same law that created gender equity in sports, and that law also applies to promoting gender equity on all levels of a campus. And so, as if we can understand that students who are experiencing harassment, assault, and abuse are not having equal access to a safe learning environment, that's the way that Title IX has had to play a role in college campuses related to campus sexual assault. And so right now, Title IX protects the rights of students on college campuses, as well as staff and employees on college campuses, and it really requires that any harassment or assault that happens within the school environment is effectively addressed, and that there are active efforts to prevent sexual harassment and assault on campus.
Thank you for that. So Laura, can you give the viewers information on how they can reach you or your organization?
Sure. So I'm here representing the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, and we have a number of informational materials, different educational pieces, information, fact sheets on our website, and you can find that at nsvrc.org. So again, our acronym for the National Sexual Violence Resource Center is nsvrc.org. And we're also on Facebook, Twitter, and many other social media platforms. And you can join our communities there. And we are constantly sharing news and research related to this issue and different ways that you can be involved in being part of the solution.
Jennifer, how can people reach your organization here in Georgia?
Okay, so our website address is www.GNESA, stands for Georgia Network to End Sexual Assault. So gnesa.org, or if they want to email, it's info@ganessa.org. And then, of course, if you go to the website, there's phone numbers there, but the phone number 404 815-5261, and probably email would be best. I would say, or go to our website, but there's definitely different information on the website that they can, peruse through. And if you're in the Atlanta area, we're always doing free trainings, and they're more than welcome to attend a training that we're conducting for law enforcement, for sexual assault nurse examiners, victim advocates, prosecutors. Again, and it's free, so they can, more than happy to go, or more than welcome to go to those trainings if they choose. Or we're more than happy to send them any information that they may need, or send them in the direction of maybe an SBRC or something if we don't have something.
Absolutely. Well, I thank both you and Laura for being on the show today, giving great advice and information that is much needed. Like I said, just because April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month does not mean May, June, July, August, all the way to December we should not be talking about this issue. We need to be talking about it all the time because it affects all of our communities. So thank you all for being available.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for having us.
So we are going to end tonight's show with the medical trailblazer of the week. And, usually I do a person, but today I'm actually going to do an institution. I'm actually going to highlight my alma mater, Spelman College. We just, April 11th, celebrated 138 years of existence. So, I love my alma mater dearly. My alma mater has been a trailblazer in such ways that I am blessed to have been able to attend. So just to give you some background on Spelman College and why they are medical trailblazers. Spelman was, like I said, founded April 11th, 1881. At the Atlanta Baptist Female Seminary by two founders, Sophia B. Packard and Harriet E. Giles, in the basement of Friendship Baptist Church. In 1882, Packard and Giles were introduced to John D. Rockefeller, who pledged $250 to the school. The school then moved to the present site at 350 Spelman Lane, where it occupies 9 acres, and at that time was 5 framed buildings in 1883. In 1884, we changed our name to Spelman Seminary in honor of Mrs. Laura Spelman Rockefeller and her parents, who were longtime activists in the anti-slavery movement. Under the direction, and actually at that time, let me back up, Spelman was founded because there were no schools for Black women to attend to get a high school diploma. So the first class that actually graduated from Spelman, they had high school diplomas, and then later the college department opened up in 1897. 4 years after that, which was 1901, the first college degrees were granted to Jane Anna Granderson and Claudia T. White. Now, our third president, Lucy Hale Tapley, under her direction, Spelman then began to refocus on higher education. And actually, President Tapley was quoted as saying, "Any course of study which fails to cultivate a taste and fitness for practical and efficient work in some part of the field of the world is unpopular at Spelman and finds no place in our curriculum." So President Tapley set us up very nicely for the goals of the college. The nursing curriculum was then strengthened underneath President Tapley, and to date, Spelman College is the first school of record for Black student nurses. So we changed the name in 1924 to what is now Spelman College, and Spelman consistently ranks among the Ivy League colleges and universities as the best school in the nations. At a time when we're talking about college admission scandals at supposedly the biggest and the best schools, Spelman has always maintained the standards and integrity for which we were founded. And, you know, I just want to highlight Spelman. Spelman, thy name we praise, standards and honor raise. Thank you so much for my foundation. To date, Spelman is also #2 as far as placing African female doctors into medical school. So, you know, we definitely have a place in the medical field, and I am proud to say that I am a Spelman alum. Until next time we meet, thank you very much for tuning in to Health Tips with the Nation's Bedside Doctor on Clark TV Network. Please have a great week and weekend, and I look forward to seeing you soon.